The storm clouds hanging over Port Charles seemed darker than usual as Ava Jerome sat alone in her gallery office, staring at a sealed envelope lying on her desk. For weeks, one question had haunted her. Who was Phoebe really? The little girl had arrived in their lives under mysterious circumstances, carrying secrets that seemed to multiply with every passing day. What began as a simple search for answers had evolved into an obsession involving Ava, Alexis, and several of Port Charles' most powerful families. Now the truth was finally within reach. Or so Ava thought. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the envelope. Before she could open it, her office door burst open. Alexis Davis entered. "You got the results?" Alexis asked. Ava nodded. The tension between the two women was palpable. Neither wanted to admit how terrified they were. The DNA test represented more than scientific evidence. It represented the possibility that everything they believed about Phoebe could be wrong. "Maybe we should wait," Alexis suggested. Ava laughed nervously. "Wait? After everything we've been through?" Alexis folded her arms. "Some answers change lives forever." Ava looked down at the envelope. "And some answers are worth knowing." She broke the seal. Seconds later, her face turned pale. Alexis immediately noticed. "What is it?" Ava didn't answer. She simply stared at the paper. Her eyes widened. Her mouth fell open. "No." Alexis grabbed the results from her hands. The moment she read them, she froze. For several seconds, neither woman spoke. The silence felt deafening. Finally, Alexis whispered the only word she could manage. "This can't be right." But it was. The laboratory had confirmed the impossible. Phoebe shared DNA with two families no one had expected. The report showed a biological connection that should not have existed. Ava felt her knees weaken. Someone made a mistake. Alexis shook her head. The lab repeated the test 3 times. "No." "Ava, no." Ava slammed her hand against the desk. "This is impossible." Yet the truth sat there in black and white. Phoebe wasn't who anyone thought she was. The revelation instantly connected decades of secrets, betrayals, and hidden relationships. And if the results became public, Port Charles would never be the same. Across town, Phoebe sat quietly on a park bench feeding birds. She had no idea that her life was about to change forever. The little girl had spent most of her childhood feeling different. Questions followed her everywhere. Questions about her past, questions about her parents, questions nobody could answer. Despite her young age, she sensed there was something missing, something everyone else knew, something she deserved to know. As she watched the birds scatter into the sky, she smiled. For a brief moment, she felt peaceful. Unfortunately, that peace would soon disappear. Back at the gallery, Ava paced nervously. "This doesn't make sense." Alexis continued studying the report. "The dates line up." "They can't." "They do." Ava ran her hands through her hair. The implications were staggering. If Phoebe truly carried the DNA markers listed in the report, then an entire chapter of Port Charles history had been rewritten. People thought they understood the past. They were wrong. Alexis finally looked up. "We have to tell her." Ava immediately objected. "No. She deserves the truth. She's a child." Alexis sighed. "And what happens when somebody else finds out first?" That possibility terrified both women, because secrets never stayed buried in Port Charles. Sooner or later, someone always talked. Someone always uncovered evidence. Someone always exposed the truth. The question wasn't whether the secret would emerge. The question was who would reveal it. Meanwhile, rumors were already spreading. Unbeknownst to Ava and Alexis, another person had been investigating Phoebe's origins. Someone dangerous, someone determined, someone who had recently gained access to confidential records. That person was Drew. Although his original motives were unclear, Drew had become suspicious after discovering inconsistencies in old hospital files. What he found led him down a rabbit hole of altered birth certificates, missing documents, and mysterious financial transactions. The deeper he dug, the more convinced he became that somebody had orchestrated an enormous cover-up. and now he was closer than ever to uncovering the truth. That evening, Alexis arrived home carrying the DNA report. She intended to lock it away. Instead, she found herself staring at it for hours. Every time she reread the results, she reached the same conclusion. The evidence was undeniable. Phoebe's biological history connected her to individuals nobody would have suspected. The implications stretched back years, perhaps decades. Alexis thought about all the lives affected, the friendships, the rivalries, the marriages, the betrayals. Everything suddenly looked different. A single DNA report had transformed certainty into confusion, and Alexis feared what would happen next. The following day, Ava requested a private meeting. Only 3 people attended: Ava, Alexis, and Phoebe. The atmosphere felt heavy from the moment Phoebe entered the room. She immediately sensed something was wrong. "Why are you both looking at me like that?" Ava struggled to answer. Alexis wasn't doing much better. Finally, Phoebe asked the question neither woman wanted to hear. "Did the test come back?" Ava swallowed hard. "Yes." Phoebe's eyes widened. "And?" Ava looked toward Alexis. Alexis looked toward Ava. Neither wanted to say it. The truth was simply too shocking. Finally, Alexis spoke. The results revealed something unexpected. Phoebe stared at them. "Am I adopted?" The room became silent. "Not exactly," Alexis replied. "Then what?" Ava's eyes filled with tears. Because how do you explain a truth that even adults struggle to understand? How do you tell a child that everything she believed about herself is wrong? Phoebe waited patiently, but the answers weren't coming, at least not yet. Elsewhere, another bombshell was about to explode. A hospital employee had secretly copied the DNA report. The information was no longer secure. Within hours, whispers began circulating throughout Port Charles. People started asking questions. Some dismissed the rumors. Others demanded answers. Several individuals immediately recognized the names mentioned in connection with Phoebe, and they understood the significance. If the rumors were true, the consequences would be enormous. The first confrontation came sooner than expected. A furious family member arrived at Ava's gallery demanding explanations. "Tell me this isn't true." Ava remained silent. "Tell me." Alexis stepped forward. "We're still processing everything." That response was enough. The visitor knew. The rumors were true. Shock quickly turned to anger. Years of assumptions had just been shattered. Trust evaporated. Resentments resurfaced. Old wounds reopened. The fallout had officially begun. By the end of the week, half of Port Charles seemed consumed by the mystery. Every conversation led back to Phoebe. Every rumor generated new theories. Every theory created more chaos. People questioned old relationships. They revisited forgotten scandals. They examined events from years earlier through an entirely different lens. Nothing felt certain anymore, especially for Ava. She had spent years surviving betrayals, but this revelation felt different. This wasn't merely another secret. This was a truth powerful enough to redefine multiple families, and she wasn't sure anyone was prepared for what came next. Late one night, Ava sat alone in her apartment. The city lights flickered outside her window. The DNA report rested beside her. She picked it up again. Even now she struggled to believe it. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. When she opened the door, she found Alexis standing there. Neither woman spoke immediately. They simply looked at each other. Both exhausted, both overwhelmed, both terrified. Finally, Alexis entered. "Have you slept?" Ava laughed bitterly. "Not really. Me neither." They sat together. The silence between them felt familiar, comfortable, necessary. After several minutes, Alexis finally asked the question neither woman had been able to avoid. "What happens now?" Ava stared at the report. Then she looked toward the dark city beyond her window. Her answer came quietly. "Everything changes." Because the DNA results were more than a shocking revelation. They were the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter filled with questions. A chapter filled with consequences. A chapter filled with heartbreak and perhaps redemption. Some people would gain family, others would lose it. Some relationships would grow stronger, others would collapse completely. But one thing was certain: the truth about Phoebe had finally emerged, and Port Charles would never be the same again. As dawn approached, Ava and Alexis sat together contemplating an uncertain future. Neither knew exactly what challenges lay ahead. Neither knew which secrets would surface next. Neither knew who would ultimately be hurt. But they understood one thing: the DNA test had opened a door that could never be closed. And once the entire truth came out, the shockwaves would reach every corner of Port Charles. The biggest surprise, however, had yet to be revealed, because hidden within the laboratory findings was one final secret. A secret even Ava and Alexis hadn't fully uncovered. A secret capable of turning the entire story upside down once again. And when that secret finally emerges, the lives of everyone connected to Phoebe may change forever.